So then we are back with more understandings from the time of the second tabernacle services, where you find the Aramaic English translation of the word. This translation comes from the original manuscripts of the prophets of the Tzayelic lineage. So then we can understand the time of the end. As per Yeshayahu the prophet, you find layers of understanding of the spring feast, the autumn feast, and also the returning of the cities of the Mashiach laid waste for many centuries. Reading Yeshayahu the prophet always gives few understandings of what the prophet then is explaining when the nation unfortunately was away from the holy instructions. And then the prophet at this point in time, explaining sections of chapter 1:8 as then tabernacling was established, and understandably Yeshayahu the prophet, he was making a reference of the place beyond the rivers of Ethiopia, the river Nile, the Blue Nile and the White Nile, and why it was so important during this time. Because news came out very importantly, and the place where Yeshayahu makes a reference in Africa is very important for the economy of this time of the restoration period, where then the kingdom of the north is becoming more prominent political wise. They are very much engaged in war in Syria, and they are showing some positive results. And also the fact that the Soviet Union is back, and the skirmish is going on with the United States and the Soviet Union, is bringing the situation to a new level. Now, understandably, Africa is also involved in the new system of the BRICS, and the oil prices are going up, and of course China later on is going to intervene. So there are political games going on, but the main point is, from what the Hamashiach ben Yosef was explaining in the 24th chapter of Matthew, we find then the Hamashiach explaining many sections of the autumn feast. And understandably, the Hamashiach knew what the future would hold, and not every section is today translated. Now the news are showing many areas of the crude industry. Now this is very important because the Middle East is also involved, and there is the largest market in the world yet pending. And then Yeshayahu is explaining a portion of where this place beyond the rivers of Ethiopia would become very prominent. Now he describes the place of the violent ones. And of course, war is going on for a long time. But then Yeshayahu, when he explains sections of the prophecy related with the restoration period, And then when we find Revelation, Yohanan talking of the creatures that have many eyes and those kinds of situations, it's showing a few glances of how complex the revelation can be from the perspective of the translated scripture. In fact, in Hebrew there is not a hint of understanding of living creatures. It simply does not exist in the Hebrew text. Now then, because of Revelation is linked with what the Hamashiach ben Yosef said, and also linked with Yeshayahu and Daniel and Ezekiel, what is then the flow of events from the particular news coming from the Northern Kingdom, Eastern Kingdom, and Southern Kingdom? It's a very important understanding the original manuscripts, because when people they gather around and they listen to these other religions, and there are some of the wildest understanding of Revelation and so many interpretations of living creatures and what they do and what not do, and the people get absolutely mesmerized so badly, and they never take the time to make an analysis of what the original manuscripts are teaching. Now, it does not take the divine portion of the scripture. Now, there are some facts that were mixed up with the translation. It's the only answer can give at this point in time, because these creatures later on explains mixed areas from what Ezekiel was explaining as far as the tabernacling. So then, the kingdom of the East, China, once again is dominating the market, and there are very many news related with the disparity of prices from the Chinese yen and the USD, and obviously it's nearly 7 USD, speaking 7 times the price of 1 yen. However, let's make sure people understand there are a whole lot more many countries using the Chinese money. So it's not the price per each, it's obviously how many nations are using the Chinese money. So then, that's another portion of the understanding. Find the kingdom of the North absolutely in cahoots with the United States, and then the ceasefire in Syria. Now I have the Chinese money strengthening itself concerning how many countries are using the Chinese money, not the price per each. And then Africa involved with jacking up the price of crude. Now, when people spend the time reading the holy instructions, we don't have to become geniuses in understanding the importance of the Congo. So the question is, what has Congo to do with the South Africans? The scripture is giving us very few clues of the importance of the kingdom of the South. Now, is the kingdom of the South only because the kingdom of Ethiopia was very prominent back then? And the enlightenment of the kingdom of the South is based from tabernacling only? Or is it explaining what Yeshayahu the prophet had said regarding then the place beyond the rivers of Ethiopia? Now, comes a very important understanding. If only tabernacling was important, then we would be talking only the northern section. Now, why has the prophet mentioned the southern section? So then, there is a political game going on with South Africa and the linking with China and also the Middle East, because this link must provide stability for the BRICS system and must have a link with the Arab world and South Africa, and the Arab world and China with South Africa. So the main objective is reaching from afar the great regions of the Congo. Now, as was explained before, Congo is due for election. Now then, as our country begins to develop its bearings for this year, and the new government is very shortly coming to power, and there are obviously many changes coming, but these changes won't change the flow of events of the original manuscripts. In fact, there are some sections regarding our country that at this point in time are not very positive. Now, depending on what relationship a person has with the divine, you can understand positively as money or positively as a spiritual completion. It truly depends where the person is at. Now then, explaining these instructions from the viewpoint of the original manuscripts, there are a couple of ways of understanding this. The first is then when the people have only material things in their minds, they simply don't have any spiritual walk. Now then, the translation from the Septuagint is truly repleted with language problems. Simply language problems. Because the divine exists. Now then, why there are so many jumpings of understanding from a side to the other? Because Revelation is like this. Revelation is not a straightforward reading. Revelation is a culmination of thousands of understandings ever since the divine has established a contact mostly at the moment with Moshe, Abraham, and then his father-in-law Jethro, and then the Akkadians and Sumerians already had a very limited exposure from the divine. Now then, translations. Mitzrayim, Egypt. Why is it so important at the moment, the new capital of Cairo? So then, since there are so many people in many kinds of walks, many kinds of understandings from the translated manuscript, and there are some traditions that were handed over for so long, and some people are so indoctrinated in nonsense scripture that they simply bluntly say, it's not for any person to understand, and then they live on the way they want, sin or no sin or any kind of a way. And truly, they expose themselves as ignorant, because the scripture from the divine, not a portion of it was made strange. Now, concerning the human beings, there are no mysteries, though Devarim 29:29 explains, and the mysteries belongs to the divine, and so on. He explaining simply areas of the spiritual realm not made for human beings. So it's not because the divine does not want to reveal. There are some areas that was not made for human beings. However, the rest of it, we should be concerned in learning it and understanding it. Now, these people that were walking with the divine, they did not put alcohol in their mouths. They were people that were 100% sober in their entire lives. Is anything wrong with alcohol? Absolutely. Alcohol impairs the mind from its proper position. Now, it depends what kind of a walk a person makes a choice in life. Not if a person is going to walk cleanly as intended by the divine. But in no section of the instructions you are going to find that it's okay to drink alcohol. You won't find it. Shaliach Shaul stated, be sober-minded in every section. The prophets stated, stay away from strong drink. The prophets themselves. In the Hamashiach, he was always talking of grape juice, non-spoiled wine, grape juice. The priests in the temple, they had fresh grape juice. So then, the reason these many understand is, we spoke of Syria, we spoke of China, we spoke of the Northern Kingdom, we spoke of the United States. Then, obviously, the situation regarding the Eastern Kingdom, and then the Southern Kingdom and Africa and Congo. Now, from the straight viewpoint of the mind, why there are so many variants? Because that's the way revelation works. Revelation is gathering or grouping of these dynamics going back and forth in many sections. Now, when a person is involved with drinking or smoking or pornography or any other area, there is then a portion of walk with the divine that is absolutely halted. The limitation comes from the person, does not come from the divine. Other than what Moshe was talking of, Deuteronomy or Devarim 29:29, the secret situations that were not meant for human beings. The rest of it is plainly given. Now, there are people who enjoy wine, whiskey, some other kinds of beverages. Some people have the opinion, as long as you are by yourself, you can drink yourself to death if you want, and so on and so forth. That's fine. However, in a spiritual understanding, when it's the time to give the personal testimony regarding the Holy Scripture. Now, personal testimony, the understanding is, what are then the steps of formation regarding then the Holy Scripture? How you became aware of the Holy Manuscripts. It's truly in line with what Shaliach Shaul has said in Romans 12, renewing of the mind. How you came to the renewal of your mind. Then when a person does not have a line of clean walk with the divine, then when it's time for these kind of understanding, explanations, and testimonies, a person simply does not have the ability of explaining. Now, on the other side of it, of the situation, you have the Scripture, you have the Torah, you have the prophets, you have the content of the literary portion of it. But the world does not revolve only on this. If you are a person who watches pornography regularly in television or computer, you are not going to have spiritual understanding for very long. Because these dirty habits hinders any kind of proximity with the divine when it comes to spiritual understandings. Now, nobody's perfect. That's what many people say. So then when people refuse to read the Holy Instructions in its original form, for instance, was given the information there are no living creatures from the original manuscripts. So where did they get these living creatures from? It's non-existent in the original Hebrew. Now then, so many of these understandings, a great portion of it are facts. Simply facts. The other portion of it is the language. Learning the original language so a person has an understanding of the flow of the culture. Habits. The feasts. People must become part of it. Now, what the translation has given for so long is you can maintain some sort of a salvation and detach yourself from its obligations. And then it becomes nonsense because you read the original manuscript, where are these living creatures? And then there are so many explanations and people going up in the third heaven and having visions of the divine. And then they saw this creature like these with had many eyes and so on and so forth. And then you glance the original, you don't even find the word. has absolutely nothing to do with living creatures. More so replete with eyes and understandings like this. He simply doesn't have it. Now then, based from these, what can we expect from our country that was founded upon scriptures, even though, a lot of it is unfortunately translations? What can we expect from the divine for our country? Mostly from Daniel. Daniel 11, there are so many understandings of what should be expecting. And positively, these understandings are completions of Daniel and a portion of it of Ezekiel. But then the problem is the translators, unfortunately, because of lack of culture and lack of understanding, they did not translate it properly. Now then, our country has a new government this year. A few more days, then it's changing. But then what is the relation of our country and other countries, such as the Kingdom of the East, the Kingdom of the North, and the Kingdom of the South? These are the main players of this period of the Restoration period. Our country is direct linked with Africa. There is absolutely certain understanding from Yeshayahu explaining tabernacling, because the words that are used in Hebrew is very much linked up with tabernacling. And then the place beyond the rivers of Ethiopia is south of tabernacling. And then in Daniel 11 you find movements of troops north and south, and then the formation of the armies, then later on marching from the east. But when speaking of armies, the Kingdom of the North, known as today the Soviet Union, is the very place where you find then in the northern portion of Africa skirmishes where they come and crush it. There are very specific understandings of the flow of events. I'm not talking about the Torah at the moment. Simply explaining times and seasons related with this particular prophet that lived his life on behalf of explaining the kingdoms of the Gentiles. Daniel was not a prophet of tabernacling. Daniel was mostly a prophet related with the Gentile world. Ezekiel, his contemporary, was mostly tabernacling. Now then, can the people understand this scripture? Now, if they do not make changes in their lives to do exactly what Shaliach Shaul said, and renew your mind with the holy instructions, with the Torah, the Tanakh, then the prophets, then they are failing in their own lives. And not only this, because these translations are so widely used, they don't have the capability of explaining. So the only true measuring stick is placing a person in a position of giving personal testimony. Because it's not a fact of pointing fingers or questioning. It's a situation of what Shaliach Shaul has said. Be ready in season and out of season. So the best way of finding if a person is in a proper path is by personal testimony. And there is no such a situation, because God never told me to go up there. It has nothing to do with it. Each person is obligated of studying the original manuscripts. Now, in what level? Depending on the walk of every day. Some people, they are mightily used when they understand a tiny portion of the scripture. Because from this point on, you're speaking of faith, not of facts. What gives the content of the personal testimony is the faith that the person develops after understanding the facts. Now, if thus far is confusing, can you imagine going through the Revelation, the Galah? This manuscript's not straight. It's not A, B, C organized chronological. No, it's not. Now, the gathering of this information depends very much of the walk of each individual. Now, if a person has a habit of drinking and wants to understand the spiritual portion of this particular time and in the autumn feast, I must stop drinking. There are no other options. If a person is smoking, he wants to understand these holy manuscripts, the person must stop smoke. Now, is there condemnation? No, there is no condemnation. Nobody's condemning or pointing the finger, because it depends the personal desire of learning this particular scripture. Because Shaliach Shaul has said, renew your minds. And renewing the mind is an individual basis. Now, you can't wish a certain spiritual understandings if you don't study. How are you going to become a mechanic if you don't study mechanics? Now, there are many other understandings of these situations. Some people, they practice habits in their relationship that is not truly what the divine has intended. There are many actions that many couples they are involved with that they don't participate with the world, but they do the world's way. So this is not truly a condemnation. Only explaining if there is a wish of understanding the restoration period in Revelation, you must have a certain type of walk. Because the divine of this Holy Scripture requires, it's a requirement of the divine. It's not a bargain. A person can be involved in many habits of the world and then coming at the scripture and trying to understand the whole lot. It's simply not doable. And this fact is very true. Because not only they are lying to themselves, the problem is, then when situations in the government are taking place or other countries, they don't understand. And a lot of people, they think they should use force, so then the country goes in a certain direction, but the problem is, it's not the time of force. There are already given forces to certain parts of the world to do certain tasks. And as the New World has ended, New World Order has ended, then there is a shift going on. There is a transitional time going on. So then, as far as this drinking situation or the habit of drinking, I used to drink, not much, but sporadic. But it came a point where I couldn't anymore because my joints were hurting so bad, and my doctor prohibited, either from the divine intervention or any other situation, or then I didn't drink anymore. Speaking of spiritual situations, it helped greatly. Are those people who are drinking should be condemned? Not for my part. Because as long as studying as per the instructions, then the divine has his position as far as is this person either drinking or not and involved in habits that shouldn't. Because these truly shows the lack of faith of the individual and the divine. And the only person that can measure this is truly the divine. But then understanding Revelation, these last half hour or so talking, that's only the initiation of what it requires for Revelation, for Galah. Understand the flow of events of Galah. Now in Daniel 11 explains a very strong point with Africa, principally the region of Congo, because the strength and the power of the Soviet Union is beyond the Congo. The Northern Kingdom is going to take on the arms trade around the world. And it is truly very big. Because of the inexpensive and high quality equipment, nations are becoming more developed. And because the layer of Daniel in what he's explaining is truly global-wise. So for the Soviets, for instance, Congo is not very big. It has a huge influence in industry. But what they are gaining from the rest of the world comparing with the Congo is minimum. Now China, however, is another situation. China is purely trade. If the Chinese get a hold of Africa and organize the Congo, then our economy is sunk. Because the recuperation of our economy is directly dependent upon organizing this particular area of the world. The analogy that the Hamashiach ben Yosef explained in the 24th chapter of Mediciyahu, though A very tiny portion was explained. It is reflecting in these particular prophecies, these reflected prophecies. It's already showing its power in the events thus far. They are flowing as per the chronological explanation. So then next time when we continue with this particular juggling of so many layers at the same time, and for the person that listens for the first time, is mostly nonsense because they can't relate with the structuring of the scripture, of the original manuscript. So then, when it lacks the structuring, then a person doesn't understand where this content is there, where this content is there. Why is this talking of these and then the other? And these are simple preparations for Galah, for revelation. And then later on, sections each by each, either trade or military or then tabernacling, then a person must select. And then understand each of them and then as a whole, and then later on, during the time of the autumn feast, then Revelation chapter 8. And understandably, chapter 8 of Revelation is from chapter 20 and then 21st. Now that's another problem because they were indiscriminately translating documents, don't even know where to put them. So when there is a chronological understanding is one situation. When there is a structuring understanding, it's another situation. So the 8th chapter of Revelation is not truly 8, if you want to talk of chronological order. Whoever translated gave the 8th chapter because had no clue what they were translating. Not because they didn't know how to read, but they did not understand the structure. Why then, from the best of their knowledge, they placed chapter 8 there? It's absolutely wrong. Because they did not understand what Vaikra, the 23rd chapter, was explaining. They were not from the culture. Natural understanding is a person is going to translate it, okay, this word means this, but then when you structure the whole situation, so then the autumn feast then is revealed, then how are they going to get the revelation of the autumn feast if they don't understand the structure of the revelation itself? What does it mean, the autumn? Is that only a word? Well, there are steps of formation until you understand it. So I'm going to explain this next time, so please stay tuned.